remember to hit record, and then I get to say, stop my screen share, spotlight my video. I think those are my 3 steps that I'm going to do here. Let's try that once more with feeling. Remove spotlight, and then spotlight for everyone. Okay, greetings. Hey, everyone, I'm Joel. It is Thursday, June the 3rd. It's 4 o'clock in the Central Time Zone, but it's 5 o'clock in New York, which means it's time for the weekly briefing. I am your fearless leader and host today. My co-conspirator, Tim, is busy in New York. I think he's actually at the Whitney today. So he's kind of playing hooky, but we're gonna give him a pass because he's out there in the world. Yay, go Tim. Good to be with all of you. This conversation I want to have today was born out of a chat that I was having with my team earlier today when we were saying, hey, what do we hear? What are we hearing from owners right now? And I think something that was this recurring theme was everyone talking about how, yes, there's so much to learn in running a creative firm. There's all these 7 ingredients. There's these different areas of marketing and sales and finance and production, whatever. And we can learn all these specific things, but what's the meta of owners that are on this journey from, let's call it, from being an emerging firm to being a thriving firm to being a mature firm? And you know what the meta, like the thread that runs through all of that, is community, which is a bit surprising to some people because some people think, well, it's the shops that have all the best talent or that win the best clients or do the best work or win the most awards. And so this community theme keeps coming back up. So I reached out and invited a few of your peers to join me in this conversation. And I had a few willing accomplices, namely Mr. Dominic. I'm going to spotlight you, my friend. Mr. Jed. These folks are like, okay, here I am. Ed's like, yeah, I'm back on Spotlight. And wait, who am I missing here? Is that the 3? That's the 3. Okay. All right. With apologies to, this is not a very diverse panel today. This is because I suck and I reached out, 30 minutes ago and said, hey, who's available? But that being said, Dominic, say hello, give us a quick intro and say hello to folks here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and hello to everyone. My name is Dominic. I run Soul Matter, which we call the perspective studio for tastemakers. So we focus a lot on fine art and entertainment strategy as much as the production side. And we're also brokering premium NFTs now as well. And we've been doubling down on the community message since last summer when we did Revolve with Joel and Tim. And I just think it's a great subject to talk about because I'm lately been able to make some really interesting observations from some of the things we've been doing in that vein. So happy to have the convo today.
Super cool. By the way, doesn't Dominic have like a killer voice? It's like, normally this is the moment when I would say, you have a face for radio, as they say. That's the old joke when you want to insult somebody. But you've got like right. the face for TV and the voice for radio. Okay, with that said.
Geez Louise.
Ed, please introduce yourself, say hello to everybody, and give us the 1 sentence for anyone here that doesn't know you.
Hi, I'm Ed Ryan. I'm the owner of Spilt in Denver. We're kind of everything: design, animation, content creation for advertising, film and streaming, and entertainment.
And you also have some interesting stories to tell about the role of community over the years in the life of your creative firm. So I'm jazzed that you're here. Thanks for jumping in, especially considering you just spent the past hour listening to me and your peers talk. It's one of those days we're all on Zoom eternally. Jed, you as well. Thank you for jumping in here. Can you introduce yourself?
Happy to be here. I'm Jed Mortensen. I have a production company called Waypoint Films that's based here in Boulder, Colorado, right down the street from Ed. And we are lucky enough to do short form live action all over the US and actually globally the last 5 or so years. And yeah, grateful to be here.
So Dominic, I'm going to circle back. Thank you, Jed, by the way. Dominic, I'm going to circle back to you because I heard you already like a step ahead of me. Because let's just say this, I'm sure most owners at some point in their journey, I certainly had this moment in mind when I sort of thought, man, I got a lot of competition, guys down the street nipping at my heels, person across town, right? And I eventually want to compete with these people in New York and LA. Hanging out with these people, why would I do that? Because these are my competitors and they're going to steal my leads. They're going to steal my clients. They're going to whatever. Why is that such a flawed way of thinking about community?
I mean, I can look at it from my perspective and say that I think, I only compete with myself is the first part of that. Like, I think that what I like to do with people that are sort of in the same space is foster authentic, emotional connections and build actual rapport with them. Because what I have found over the years is that, beyond the Instagrams and the platforms, the community should be platform agnostic. And when that's the case, I find myself in many instances hiring these people that used to be my competitors or having opportunities to collaborate with them. And it's kind of less about winning and it's more about the right recipe.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember someone once telling me wisely, it may have been my former business partner, Steve, when he said, look, never burn a bridge because you're eventually over the span of your career going to work with everybody. So even that bitter competitor that you may not like very much today, like you just mentioned, Dominic, maybe next week or next year, that's going to be the resource, the talent that you need to go and win whatever opportunity is out there. Now that said, Ed, let me turn it to you and ask you maybe a similar question. Before you answer, let me also just mention anyone here that if you have a question, comment, drop it in the chat, of course, or raise your hand if you want to jump into the conversation. We welcome you to jump in here. Ed, you've always been what I would call noticeably generous, like exceedingly open to sharing with your peers, meeting other owners, just being out there in the industry and connecting with people. What's behind that? What would you say to somebody who says, why, hang out with my competitors? Why would I do that?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I think part of that stems from personality and part of it stems from the area we are. Here in Denver, we have competition among each other, but for the most part, most of our business doesn't come from the area. So we're, our business coming from the outskirts and out of state allows us to, I think, align and be friends with each other. I know all the owners of all the other companies in town. I love seeing them. I love giving them suggestions of things that I've gone through. And I know I can go back to them and do the same thing. And I think, ultimately it's up to you to find out what's the right answer for how to run your place or do it your way. But at the same time, I've always been a fan of someone knows how to do this already. And if you don't ask, you'll never learn. And then when you learn from people, you might as well share that, right? Because I didn't figure that out. I figured that out through my network of great people. So
how many times has that come back to burn you, where you're like, oh, I shared something and then that person stole that from me, and I'm going to use air quotes, and now that hurt came back and that hurt me in some way?
I can't think of one time ever, honestly. I mean, I've had employees leave and start their own freelance careers, then going into the solopreneur studio, and I still meet with them personally and talk to them about this is what I did at that step, this is how I failed, here's how you can get around that, because ultimately they'll still work and help me in the long run. And I don't know, I just feel like it's a good thing to do, I guess.
Dominic, what about you? Have you ever been burned where you generously shared something, hanging out with whatever it is, a collaborator, competitor or something, and then later looked back and said, man, I should have been a lot more selfish or greedy with that information?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened a couple times, but for me, it's a fool me once kind of scenario where I have had those experiences. But what I realized is that it really came down to the curation part of who I was investing time and energy and resources into. And the more that I focused on kind of the vulnerability piece and connecting with people on a human level, that I was able to qualify those people a lot quicker and understand energetically, you know, if I was even gonna put myself in a position to have that happen. So for me, it's been a big live and learn, but I think it really comes down to sticking with your tribe.
All right, Jed, I got to drag you into this. What's it been like for you over the past year or two as you've opened yourself up, you know, and started participating more in community, not just locally, but even on platforms like this, and of course, what we try and foster through RevThink. What's any sort of takeaways or discoveries or things that you could share?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the year or two time frame, because the sort of example I wanted to give was specifically with regard to live action production during the pandemic. There's a group of us who started a sort of a producers group on Facebook, and during the COVID time, we did a couple of basically Zoom calls and talked about it, and it was almost like therapy. It was it was really valuable to be able to share what I was going through, and then also hear, first of all, that other people were going through similar things and felt the same way, and then also to get valuable information. And there were people, you know, very generous, like for example, Ben from Image Brew, which is a production company here in Denver, and technically one of my competitors. We do the same sorts of things, but he had done a live action shoot before most of us in that group, and he was really generous about sharing sort of the protocols they went through and what seemed to work and what didn't. And it just made me very grateful that somebody else was willing to share that information, and sort of reminded me how valuable it is for me to share similar information if there's, you know, ever anything I can help with.
So is competition in that context that you described there, is competition a real thing, or is it mostly a perceived thing or something that our fears exaggerate?
Yeah, I think it tends to be more of a perceived thing. I think to Ed's point, it's a small market here in Colorado, so we all know each other personally and enjoy hanging out together, but we're also lucky that the work is coming from so many different places, from different coasts and all over the place. So it's not like, you know, it's not like we're all the three companies are always the triple bid on the same job every time, and we're always duking it out for the same stuff. There's enough of a diversity of projects and clients that the reality is that's rarely the case.
So I see two names here of folks in attendance. I'm just going to mention Carolyn. Hi there. Also PJ, our friend from Laundry, because I think of those two people as, I might be curious to drag you in if you're interested, that there's a small market dynamic. Again, Denver's not small, but let's just call it small versus big. And let's say big is New York and LA. And I think there's like historically a perception that if you're in a small market that it's much more competitive, right? We're fighting with the people down the street. And then there's this moment when you realize and wake up and say, well, gosh, why am I competing with the people down the street for the job that's here in town if I could just go to the next city, or I can go to New York or LA, and now I'm competing on that stage, and it's more of a choice. It's more of just a decision. And then you start realizing, gosh, there's so much opportunity. I think I have more problems capturing all the opportunities than I do fighting off competitors or so-called competitors. And I'm curious to hear one of you chime in on that, but I'm also curious if like PJ or Carolyn would say, well, the same thinking is actually true in New York and LA, where we think, oh, big city, big market, so many companies, but nobody really competes all that much but I bet the perception is the same. Who wants to?
I've actually found, my experience has been that the New York and LA clients or companies are much more, I'm not sure what the right word is, diligent about NDAs and really covering their ass in terms of competition. And it's one of the things I enjoy about the Colorado, the Front Range market, is people are less concerned about that. And again, more willing to share, you know, ideas and experiences and cooperate on that kind of thing.
Right. All right, Carolyn just offered to share a good story.
I was going to say, I thought you called on me because I just dropped that in the chat. Because hi, everybody.
Hey,
I'm I'm outside New York City.
Do me a quick favor. Introduce yourself and let us know, let everyone know who you are, what you do.
Sure. You can look at my website, which is carolynreps.com. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Zoic Studios. So I'm their head of sales nationally. I do East Coast and West Coast and oversee their Midwest market for them. And I also work as the US liaison for Production Service Network, which during COVID, weirdly enough, I thought was going to be like a complete dead zone and turned out to be my biggest billing client. I just booked a job last week that's shooting in Saudi Arabia. I was bidding against Radical Media. I mean, just like, so bizarre. If you guys have been seeing the Corona Seltzer work running, I did all the locations for that. I mean, it's been like a weird push-pull year where you reinvent yourself. But I dropped something in the chat because I'm also on the board of AICP, and I'm sure some of you probably dial into either the AICP calls or go to their Zoom meetings they've been having. But the meeting that shocked me the most was a couple months ago, and James, who runs Frame Store, I'm sure all of you are familiar, actually said that he had a job come in. I don't know that it was branded or episodic or a movie or what. He said it was so big he didn't know what to do, and he actually ended up calling the mill and MPC and just saying, I need to outsource some of this to you guys.
Wow.
Because I can't even do this. It's too big. And so what Jed was saying about like keeping a friendly relationship, I think Dominic brought this up also about like not just knowing your competitors, but I think admiring them and being a fan and knowing their strengths. I think when you're talking to clients, it could be Amazon, it could be, it could be BBDO, it could be whatever it is. When you know your competitors' strengths and you can speak to them, I actually think it makes you look so much more powerful. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this business because we're fans. You know what I mean? Like, I don't represent MJZ, but I had worked with 8 VFX when they did I, Tonya, and I ran out to see Cruella this weekend. And I came back and was like, I talked about it all week. I was like, oh my God, I saw Cruella and Craig did such a great job. And, MPC did the visual effects, and you guys should know, and I'm giving you this as good, hot information, talking point. The costumes will be nominated, if not win. It was the same costume designer who did Mad Max Fury Road. It's fantastic. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So.
Well, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that, Carolyn. I'm going to bring in PJ here for a second too and get his take. Let me see if I can find it in my list. There he is. But Ed, you had a story or two or example you wanted to share real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think like kind of what I was talking about before, like, being open and working with people, has allowed us to both be on the receiving end of projects and the giving end, in that sense of like, we've had major, major companies in the game come to us and be like, we can't handle this. Can you do it? Unfortunately, like, it's always white label because no one wants to say that like they can't handle it and another studio is helping them, but it's great. It's always a learning experience for myself, for our team. And we do the same thing when we're like, wow, this is a massive particular project with, its specific needs. And while we could get by, it's much better if we pull in these other experts about it. But you don't know that if you're not spending time figuring out who those other experts are. Well
said, right? PJ, what's up, man? Say hello and introduce yourself.
Hey guys, how are you? I'm PJ, ECD and co-founder at Laundry here in LA and San Francisco. Yeah, I mean, I think what jumped out I kind of jumped in a little bit late on this, but what jumped out from what I'm hearing is that like, or at least what we see is that like, we lose out on projects. I can think of a couple where one in Minneapolis, they went with a local studio that was 2 blocks away from where they were. So like, there's definitely a world where local studios in places have the advantage over national studios in some ways. And then I think as far as a community, I'm really just kind of piggybacking on what Caroline was just saying. Like, I have some friends at an extraordinary studio in London, and they told me a story that kind of said the same thing as Carolyn, where they're like, look, we do what we do exceptionally, but there needed to be a CGI, I think monkey or something. And like, that's just not what we do. So we called MPC because we were friends with them and they're really good at that. And we got that asset for the particular shot we needed, and then did our thing around it, and it made us look like experts, and we're just honest to like what the end goal was, which was a beautiful commercial for their customer. You know what I mean? And like we approach that often like that. We'll partner with other studios if it's like a cell animation thing that, you know, there's a studio in South Africa that's amazing at, and also usually it's more cost effective, and it's just like, why wouldn't you, for the sort of the greater good? You know what I mean? So it kind of really goes every which way in that sense.
PJ, do you find are there other unexpected benefits, right? Like you're also a generous, open person. You willingly drop into the weekly briefing and other things that we're doing here on a regular basis. Are there just other benefits, right? Like to saying, yeah, I'm going to be part of this group that hangs out regularly, or have dinner with these folks. Like hopefully we'll do next week if I can get out there. But,
yeah, totally. I mean, it's the same thing as I think everybody here has probably experienced in some ways, where like like it's so, I mean, this is high stress, especially as a business owner, or really any part of it. Like, so it's very easy to get into the trenches and just be like, fuck, my world's imploding. How come no one else is going through this? And then you talk to other studio owners and or not owners, just anything. And you realize, holy shit, they're going through the exact same thing, and have like, then it makes it way less gnarly, for lack of better terms. Like you're just kind of like, all right, like we're like, it makes it, I don't know, sting less even. And also then I think there's something to be learned too. Like I learned a lot I basically learned what I'm doing wrong a lot of the times, which is generally kind of overcomplicating things. So like someone will be like, oh yeah, we use Google Docs for our pitch decks. And you're just like, what? Oh. Like, there it is. Like, I mean, that's everybody does now, but at the time, you know, stuff like that, like it could be little things, or like, on the less sort of fun part, like I have chains or text chains and email chains of people being like, how are you navigating like the California 85 employee thing? And we'll all kind of just talk about it and go through, you know, different pieces like that and kind of compare notes. Or another one that's like, that I know a lot of studios happen too, is California likes to audit studios because of they just like to do that. And so people get these giant tax bills and be like, oh, we've been through that. That's nothing. Don't worry, your business isn't going to close down. Like, you know, so it's I think there's any number of benefits to just kind of open dialogue like that. It does get tricky, like, because we pitch against studios I'm very friendly with at very large scale sometimes, where the stakes are incredibly high. And then it's just like, well, how much do you share or not share? And you know, I think you share as much as you can, but at the same time, it's not like I'm going to show them my pitch deck if we're competing against each other either. Yeah. Like, you know.
Clearly. So, but I heard you say as much as we can. Like there's up to that line, we're going to share as much as we can. And I'll share one little thought that I just had, PJ, when you were talking, because it's a bit of a discovery for myself as well. So some of you know I run a group called Confab, which is a bunch of the graduates, people that have been through Jumpstart, and then every week we get together and we process, right? And historically, that's been me and a guest, and I've dragged more than a few of you into that, and it's like a conversation of me and a special guest talking about a thing. Well, we've been evolving the format there to more of a group conversation, or what you might call a mastermind. And you know what I've already noticed? Just like right now, see how there's like 5 faces on the screen? What's funny is, like, PJ, you'll be talking about one problem that you're having. And when you're in community, if there's 10 or 15 or 20 voices, they're all people that are all there listening, just probability wise, the odds are high that somebody's gonna be like, oh yeah, we've been audited by the state of California. Here's what happened. Here's what you should do about it. Here's what you should know. And that's like an incredible shortcut. It's just practical, right? So I've been involving this format I'm doing now to be like, let's just, every time we meet, let's have a big group conversation rather than me just having a one-on-one conversation with some smart person. I read this book. It's one of these little things that someone promotes on the internet because he's selling a program or something. But I was like, okay, I'll bite on that. 8-minute mastermind. And this thing's killer. I'm learning so much just about, again, power of community, There's very little competition in the world. There's so much to gain. And when you're in a group setting, it's amazing how whatever your problem is, there's a pretty good chance if you've got 10 or 20 or however many other people in the room that someone's going to say, yep, been there, done that. And I just love the simplicity of that.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I have text chains with like heads of production at probably every one of our competitors that like, and it'll just be like, when are you guys going back to the office? Or do you know a freelance producer? Like just kind of everything we're all going through. And it's just like, and then you kind of find the common, like sort of the median. You're like, okay, well, maybe that's, which way to go or not go or that kind of a thing. It's kind of a temperature gauge too sometimes.
Yes, for sure. Ed, you and Jed, of course, are subjecting yourselves to a community experiment right now, right? We're 1 week in. What's already some of your takeaways from joining this cohort we're doing in Jumpstart of what there's about 10 or 12 people in there in total? Ed, what's your takeaway so far?
For me, it's just the perfect time where, I'm trying to focus on the next steps. Like you spoke in just what we watched last week about like, there's the growth and then the plateau. So it's like, like what's the next step? I mean, we've been a business for 14 years, like we grow slowly every year, but to initiate that next phase of it, I feel like that's a lot of my time and energy that needs to be dedicated to it and in the right manner. And, just the exercise we've done this last week has really, in one way, it's really helped me because I've already been thinking about some things. So like this one was easy. I know the next one's going to be super hard, but it's kind of like, yeah, these are the things that I don't need to worry about as the owner, like, and these are the things that I should focus on. And that's just invaluable because like, ultimately, I'm the kind of person, as I think many of us are, who take on that little bit extra. Like I can just do that. That's just going to take me an hour a week, or again and again and again. And then before you know it, you're like, well, that's 20 hours a week. And I really need to be doing this. So,
well, I'm also like the conversation we just had an hour ago in that workshop where there were some other owners that were saying, hey, Ed, have you thought about, and yes, I'm on a similar journey. So there's just already this, conversation happening. That's not just you and I, there's a group, people that are ahead of you, people that are behind you, and everyone's obviously there to share. So I hope that's going to be
and
awesome.
Like, I know I talked on Tuesday, I guess it was, to all the people from the A team. And it's like, Brian Elo, like one of my best friends who helps us now on pitches, like who we all know together. Like, it's just awesome. And they're like, that's so good that he's working with you. And it's just, like instantly I felt like I built a rapport with them just by talking a little bit and like being open about where we are and what we're doing.
Exactly. It's like Miami shop, Denver shop, small world. We all know the same people. Jed, what about you? What's your sense so far, just jumping into this new group format?
Well, again, like I said before, I think one of the parts I love the most about the community thing is honestly just the therapeutic part of it. like today when we were on the call, there was, I think it was Matt Fuller, one of the other guys, we were bringing up very similar pain points that we were dealing with. And just the basic, even if he doesn't have a solution or somebody in the group doesn't have a solution, just the basic fact of hearing from somebody else that like, oh, thank God, like I'm not the only one who's dealing with this. There's other people going through this and trying to figure it out. It's just, I don't know. It's just a nice place to be.
I love it. Well, hey, I know we're at our half-hour mark, so I want to respect everyone's busy schedules. I want to say thank you, especially for Dominic, to Jed, Ed, PJ, Carolyn as well, for jumping into the conversation here on the weekly briefing. One quick note, I want to share my screen and say, if you are in our Rev community, guess what? We have a community calendar now. So every week you can just go on here and be like, oh, look, the unexpected benefits of community on the briefing. Here's what's going on in Jumpstart or in Confab. And you can just go week by week by week and see all the stuff that's going on. So that's a pretty handy little thing to have. And you can subscribe to those. So you'll get like a notification. Because if I don't get a notification, man, it ain't happening. All right. Thanks, gentlemen and lady. Always good to see everyone here in the weekly briefings. Stay strong. RevThink, we're here to help support you and help you thrive in business and life and career. So if I can help you in any way, or my team, don't hesitate to reach out. Make it a great rest of the week, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.